ਦੂਸਰੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮੁਲਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕ੍ਰਿਮੀਨਲਸ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਉਹ ਇੱਕ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀ ਪਾਰਡਨ ਦਵਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਨੇ ਜਾਂ ਵੇਵਰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਦੇ ਸਕਦੇ ਨੇ। ਵੇਵਰ ਇਹਦਾ ਢੁਕਵਾਂ ਸ਼ਬਦ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਵੇਵਰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਉਹਦਾ ਪਿਛਲਾ ਰੈਕਡ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵਿਅਕਤੀ ਦਾ ਸਾਰਾ ਸਾਫ਼ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ, ਕਲੀਨ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ।
They just raised it April 1st to $1,100 US for the criminal waiver portion. If you've had a deportation, they've actually raised that to $1,175. So it's been doubled, essentially.
Oh, I see.
I will say, Mr. Singh, I see you were charged with PPT. How much money did you make? And the minute he says, oh, I made $60,000 over the year, I said, well, how did you make $60,000 if it was dropped? Oh, well, I sold the pies or I sold cocaine. Oh, okay. Well, how often did you sell? I sold every other day. Okay. Because he voluntarily admitted to committing the crime, he now needs a waiver.
So he can ask you that how much you drink.
Yep.
If a person say, I don't drink at all after that, then you're clear. But if you say, I drink 40 ml a day, that means he's not allowed to go in. ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਅਗਲੇ ਹਿੱਸੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਅਗਲੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਹੋਣੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲੇ ਕੈਨ ਸਕਾਟ ਆਏ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਸੀਨੀਅਰ US ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਲਾਅ ਦੇ ਇੰਟੈਲੀਜੈਂਸ ਐਨਾਲਿਸਟ ਨੇ। ਦੂਸਰੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮੁਲਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕ੍ਰਿਮੀਨਲਸ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਉਹ ਇੱਕ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀ ਪਾਰਡਨ ਦਵਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਨੇ ਜਾਂ ਵੇਵਰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਦੇ ਸਕਦੇ ਨੇ। ਵੇਵਰ ਇਹਦਾ ਢੁਕਵਾਂ ਸ਼ਬਦ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਵੇਵਰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਉਹਦਾ ਪਿਛਲਾ ਰੈਕਡ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵਿਅਕਤੀ ਦਾ ਸਾਰਾ ਸਾਫ਼ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ, ਕਲੀਨ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ। ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਬਾਰਡਰ 'ਤੇ ਲੰਘਦੇ ਹੋ ਉਹ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਚੈੱਕ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੇਖਦੇ ਨੇ, ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਨਾਂ ਪੰਚ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ, ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ID ਵੇਖਦੇ ਨੇ, ਤਾਂ ਫੌਰਨ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨੋਟਿਸ 'ਚ ਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਵਿਅਕਤੀ ਦਾ ਪਿਛੋਕੜ ਕੀ ਹੈ। ਲੇਕਿਨ ਜੇ ਵੇਵਰ ਲਿਆ ਹੋਵੇ ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਪਿਛੋਕੜ ਤੁਰੰਤ ਨਜ਼ਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਉਂਦਾ। ਸੋ ਇਸ ਸੰਬੰਧ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅੱਜ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਹੋਣ ਵਾਲੀ ਹੈ। ਮਿਸਟਰ ਸਕਾਟ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਨੇ, ਅੱਜ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਟੂਡੀਓਜ਼ 'ਚ ਆਏ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ। Ken Scott, good morning.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Very good. Thank you very much for coming in.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Traffic was bad today.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about this waiver. Like, how do you obtain it, and what is the waiver process?
Let me give you a good example. Here in Surrey, we have a lot of people that were convicted of PPT, which means possession for the purpose of trafficking. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if let's just say Mr. Singh was convicted of PPT, he's inadmissible to the USA because he has a drug trafficking conviction. So he comes to our Surrey office. We have to, amongst other things, obtain his criminal record check. We have to document the fact that he's rehabilitated. Essentially, we have to show the fact that he will not reoffend again. And that's definitely a bit of a process. But generally speaking, we can get those files cleared. So it's a bit of a process, and he has some hoops to jump through. But in our case, or I should say his case, we actually do 95% of everything. He has to do very little work.
Mm-hmm. What is the application fee?
They just raised it April 1st to $1,100 US for the criminal waiver portion. And if you've had a deportation, they've actually raised that to $1,175. So it's been doubled, essentially.
Oh, I see. So if you pay $1,175, your deportation record would not show when you cross in the border.
Well, let's just say that same individual, let's just say he didn't have PPT, he had misrepresentation. And the last time here on the show, we talked about that. So if a person has misrepresentation because they had a fake marriage in USA, they get what's called, at the land border anyway, they get what's called an expedited removal and 5-year ban. The 5-year ban itself is a deportation. So he would need 2 waivers, one for the misrepresentation, which is the fake marriage, mm-hmm. and the second thing is the actual deportation when the officer says to him, sir, you have been banned for 5 years, go back to Canada. So he's got to pay the $1,175 for that 5-year ban and the $1,100 for that misrepresentation. So he's got 2 fees to pay.
If he pays both fees, then that record wouldn't show to the officer at the border?
It would still be in the computer, still in the system, but it's temporarily waived. Now, the deportation itself is fully waived, but the misrepresentation will follow him for the rest of his life. So there's nothing he can do about it for the most part other than keep getting waivers if he has misrepresentation.
So you have to keep the waiver all the time, like you keep on applying. The waiver has to be obtained every year.
Waivers generally are good for 1 to 5 years. Now, in some cases, the waiver could only be 6 months. We had a case of a gentleman that had a 6 month waiver. Without going into too much detail, he tried to harm 5 people. Again, without going into detail, and he got a 6 month waiver. So when he got his waiver, he was surprised. I said, "Well, look what you did. You tried to harm 5 people," and it made sense.
So waiver basically means that you're allowed to go into the country, but it still stays on your record.
It still stays on your record. That's true, but you're temporarily allowed to enter the USA because it's temporarily waived. Now, in the case of a 5 year waiver, after the 5 year period, we have to redo everything all over again: the letters, the rehabilitation, everything.
So people who have obtained waivers for United States, can they also travel to Europe?
No, the U.S. waiver is only good for the United States. Now, for the EU, they're coming out with a program called ETIAS, ETIAS, and people can Google it. June 2025, when that program is implemented, they're asking for essentially for everyone who's a non-EU citizen or who does not have EU status will have to get pre-cleared, which means they're going to ask about criminality, deportations, work history, everything. So, I mean, I have EU status, so for me it's different. But if you don't have EU status, you have to get the go through the ETIAS starting June 2025. And for a lot of the guys here in Surrey that have these PPT convictions, they might have trouble entering the EU.
I know a lot of people have been served and you have got them the waivers. But the same token, there are other people in the business, and why is that your fee is higher than the other one?
Well, just look at it this way. Just imagine if you had a search engine optimization company, SEO company, and your job was to businesses would retain you to position their websites on Google, like high ranking. Just imagine if you had a friend who worked at Google, and one day at a birthday party, he gave you a folder or say a flash drive, and that flash drive had Google's actual algorithm. What could you charge? The sky's the limit. It's the same with us. We've got the actual, for lack of better words, formula that CBP uses to approve waivers. So all we do is go to the regulations and all the manuals and other material, look at it, look at the person's offense, match it up, and they get approved.
Okay, tell me, if a person doesn't have a criminal record, does he still have to take the waiver? Should take a waiver?
Sometimes he does, sometimes he does not. What people don't understand, and I'm glad you brought that question up. Let's go back to the PPT. You could be charged with PPT. People don't understand what the word charge means. The charge is only an allegation. The disposition, as you are well aware, let's say a conviction, acquittal, withdrawal, or stay of proceedings. So if you were charged with PPT, but it was
PPT is a...
possession for the purpose of trafficking.
Okay.
But if it's dropped or a stay of proceedings, the border cannot make you get a waiver based upon that unless you voluntarily admit to committing the offense. So if I'm the officer and Mr. Singh is crossing the border and I see he's charged with PPT, but it was withdrawn, I will say, "Mr. Singh, I see you were charged with PPT. How much money did you make?" And the minute he says, "Oh, I made $60,000 over the year," I said, "Well, how did you make $60,000 if it was dropped?" "Oh, well, I sold the pies or I sold cocaine." "Oh, okay. Well, how often did you sell?" "I sold every other day." "Okay." Because he voluntarily admitted to committing the crime, he now needs a waiver because the way the statutes are written, they go by whatever relevant convictions you have and whatever you voluntarily admit to. So because he just admitted to me, if I was the officer, that he was selling the pies, in fact, he is now inadmissible. Not basically for his voluntary admission.
So people who do not have criminal records, it's good for them to, it's safe to take a waiver also.
No. If you have no criminal record, you don't necessarily need it because we go by the facts. And the facts, going back to the other individual, yes, he was charged, but he was not convicted. So if this individual does not elaborate at the border about the charge, he doesn't need a waiver. And the thing is, we've gotten people cleared like that. There was one gentleman accused of it, but he was not convicted because wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah, criminal record only is registered against you once you are convicted.
Correct. Exactly.
You know, getting charged by somebody, it doesn't mean anything.
Exactly. A charge is only an allegation. It's not a conviction. But for some reason, people here in Surrey, They don't understand the difference. A charge is an allegation. A disposition is a conviction. If you're not convicted, you must be innocent. So if you're innocent, why do you need a waiver? You're not convicted. Simple.
So a person who is charged, they also have some kind of record showing in the computer that this person has been charged?
At CBP, one of their databases is called TECS, TECS. On TECS, they can see all charges and convictions. So the officer will look in TECS when a person's crossing over, and will also CPIC, but look in the system and see he's charged with PPT, but it was dropped or dismissed. Then he's got to get this individual to admit to actually committing the crime. And once he admits to it, he's done. Now, if he doesn't admit to it, it's a different story.
Oh, I see. So if a person, tells the officer that, I'm not admitting or selling or anything else, but yeah, 5 years ago I was in a party, I had a little bit of a cocaine. I have a line of cocaine at that time, I used it. Then that means you can't enter?
Correct. It goes back to what I was saying before in terms of the Immigration Nationality Act. He voluntarily admitted to possession of cocaine and actually doing it, so to speak. So because if you're doing the cocaine, you have to have possession of it to do it. So if you're doing, let's say, a little bit on a mirror or a glass table, it's in your possession. So they got you for possession and use. So he needs a waiver.
Can you enter USA if you were ever convicted of PPT, you call it, purpose of possession?
You can enter with a valid U.S. entry waiver, which, like I said, are generally good for 1 to 5 years. And at times, some people get 6 months waivers. But if you have a PPT conviction anywhere in the world, not just Canada, anywhere in the world, you need a U.S. entry waiver. And you have to make sure that waiver is done correctly. A lot of these places don't know how to do these waivers correctly.
A lot of people here in Canada has been charged and convicted of drinking and driving.
Correct.
And it is a criminal record now.
Correct.
So what happens to them? They have to take a waiver too, or it doesn't really matter?
Generally speaking, the DUIs do not require a waiver, but you have to be careful with that because the fact that in itself does not require a waiver. But if the officer gets very crafty and says to you, well, how often do you drink, sir? You say, well, I drink 10 cans of beer a night. Now he can get you inadmissible under a different category, under the health category. So when you go to these borders, you got to really, really be aware of what you're telling these officers because people don't understand that these officers are not there for you. They're there to do their jobs and also essentially to keep people out who they deem are inadmissible. So you start voluntarily elaborating on stuff, you're in trouble.
So he can ask you that how much you drink.
Yep.
If a person say, I don't drink at all after that, then you're clear. But if you say, I drink 40 ml a day, that means he's not allowed to go in?
If they can show on paper that you're a drug abuser or addict, let's say alcoholic, then they could technically deem you inadmissible for that. But it's more stuff that goes along with that. They could technically, but
they can.
They can. But
that
generally
you drink every day, even if it's a 40 ml, you're an alcoholic.
I'm not sure how much 40 ml is, but
well, let's say a drink or two.
It's case by case. It just really depends. I mean, 1 drink a day might be fine, but why even elaborate?
So, what's the e-safe?
In terms of filing for a U.S. waiver, there are 2 methods. There's the paper method, which obviously paper is paper. There's the e-safe method. E-safe means electronic. So generally speaking, what the U.S. government has done is they've invested money into brand new computer databases in these different agencies. E-safe is one database. So they're trying to get a return on their investment. So they're telling people, oh, using e-safe is faster. That's not correct. It's not faster. It's the same speed as paper. Paper is when you go to the border with the packet and you give it to the officer, pay the government fee, which is $1,100. They process it, you get your decision in the mail. E-safe is you upload this stuff to the computer, you still go to the border, and you still have to get fingerprinted. So either way you're going to the border, you get your decision electronically. So either way, you're still going to the border. So we just stick with the paper because the paper makes more sense. The e-safe serves no benefit to the client. And in all honesty, I only care what benefits the client. I don't care what benefits the U.S. government. So I'm there for the client.
So at border, do they accept electronic waiver or do they accept paper also?
Except both.
Oh, I see.
Some of these officers play games and say we don't. That's not true. The regulations state they have to accept both. And I used to work for the U.S. government, as I've told you before, and I actually called the headquarters and I verified this recently. And they say, yes, we accept both. So the borders we deal with, the officers know me because of the large number of people we send down. So we send down paper, and 99% of the time, there's no issue.
So if you have paper in your hand, you can show it to them.
Yeah.
There's no excuse.
There's no excuse. You walk down with the paper, you present it to them, pay the fee, they take care of everything, and it's fine. It's simple.
Mr. Scott, anything else you'd like to say to our listeners today?
I want to say thank you for the invite. I really love coming here. We really love helping people. As you know, we're located by Dr. Chima, Scott and 72nd. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest things that people need to understand is when you go to these borders, whatever you say to these officers can and will be used against you. And most of this stuff is voluntary. So if you voluntarily tell the officers that you've done a little bit of white powder or whatever, the only person you can blame is the person looking back, at you in the mirror. Don't blame them. You blame yourself.
Mm-hmm. So what's your phone number there in your office?
604 562 8140, and we're at 7164 120th Street. We're 2 units down from Dr. Grozar Chima. Mm-hmm. So everyone knows Dr. Chima here.
Yeah. So you're pretty well next door to it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming in.
My pleasure, sir.
Thank you.
Look forward to coming back.
ਜੇ ਕੋਈ ਕ੍ਰਿਮੀਨਲ ਰੈਕਡ ਹੈ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਜਾਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਚੀਜ਼ 'ਚ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਨਵਿਕਟ ਹੋ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਹੋ, ਯੂਨਾਈਟਿਡ ਸਟੇਟਸ ਜਾਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ, ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਵੇਵ ਕਰਵਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਵੇਵ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੈਨ ਸਕਾਟ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ 604 562 8140 604 562 8140 ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਨੰਬਰ ਹੈ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਦਫ਼ਤਰ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਗੁਲਜ਼ਾਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਚੀਮਾ ਹੋਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਕਲੀਨਿਕ ਦੇ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਨਜ਼ਦੀਕ ਹੈ। ਉੱਥੇ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲ ਵੀ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਔਰ ਅਪੋਇੰਟਮੈਂਟ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਲਈ 604 562 8140 ਇਹ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਵੇਵਰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਦੇ ਸਕਦੇ ਨੇ ਅਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਐਂਟਰ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਵੈਰੀ ਮੱਚ।